The story of the 1998-99 Maple Leafs begins not in Toronto during the fall of 1998 as you would expect, but instead at a podium across the country, July 28, 1997. Vancouver, British Columbia, two men pose for the media. The greatest leader in the history of sport, Mark Messier, stands with his fists raised triumphantly, donning his brand new Canucks jersey for the first time. A jersey that over the course of the next 3 years will make the 36-year-old an astronomical $20 million richer. By his side, veteran coach turned general manager Pat Quinn, one of the prime orchestrators of the Canucks' rise from a farcical first 20 years of existence to a genuine force of nature in the early 90s. Our objective is to win a Stanley Cup, declares Quinn. Not pictured are the other prime orchestrators of the Canucks' success, Trevor Linden, Pavel Bure, and Alex Mogilny, Vancouver's soon-to-be former captain and twin Russian superstars, each of which have less than positive opinions on the new superstar edition. Within the next month, Pavel Bure will tell Pat Quinn he wants out. Less than 3 months after that, Quinn and coach Tom Rennie will be out of a job as the Canucks get off to a pitiful 4-13-2 start to the season. This is just the tip of what will be a 3-year iceberg of misery for the Canucks, all centered around the aged and disengaged Messier and his perceived cronyism. But we're going to take the off-ramp with Pat, which leads us back to Ontario in the summer of 1998, where the Leafs prepare for the upcoming drafts and debut their new coach. On the same day the Leafs lose 7th defenseman Rob Zettler to the newly extant Nashville Predators in the expansion draft, Leafs GM and president Ken Dryden presents Pat Quinn as the 25th head coach in team history. Where his predecessor Mike Murphy was unproven, Pat Quinn has a history in 3 separate coaching stints with the Flyers, Kings, and Canucks, his experiences ranging in success from meh to cup finalists. Where Pat Burns was seen as impatient, Dryden describes Quinn as hopeful. This does not mean that Quinn is a pushover players coach. Quote, "He won't tolerate much, and we need that," says Ty Domi. Quinn is tough. He's physically imposing. He played much of his time in the NHL in the bloodbath 70s. He holds his players to a high standard without running them down or demeaning them. For a team comprised of both young guys who need instruction and veterans not looking to get screamed at, but still in need of structure, Quinn should be a great fit. That is especially so since Quinn will not be the team's GM, the role where he did the most damage in Vancouver. Dryden and his cohort of advisors will continue to dictate player personnel decisions. At the draft, the Leafs are finally able to use their own first, 8th overall. Draft picks are absolutely needed for the long-term flow of players, says the Leafs draft savant Anders Hedberg. A stark contrast to the spending mentality of the Cliff Fletcher regime. The towering Kazakh Nikolai Antropov is the Leafs selection, a reach even after Toronto traded back to 10, gaining a third and losing out on either sniper Mark Bell or the gritty Mike Rupp. Despite standing at 6'6", Antropov is thin. Damian Cox of the Toronto Star describes him as a beanpole. But his numbers and raw skill are hard to deny. At the European U18 Championships in 1998, Kazakhstan in their first year in the tournament was errantly placed in Group D, the lowest tier of competition available after their switch from the Asian U18 Championships. Led by Antropov, the only NHL-caliber prospect in the tournament, the Kazakhs obliterated their competition, highlighted by a 63-0 win against Iceland, who wasn't even the worst team there. In just 5 games in the tournament, Antropov scored 23 goals and added 31 assists, averaging a hair under 11 points per game. While ultimately I'm sure this yamming on single-A players from Luxembourg didn't play a major role in the Leafs picking Nick, they probably more carefully considered his nearly point-per-game scoring rate in the Russian Second League. The Euro U18s were still impressive enough to cause me to digress. More pertinent for the upcoming 1998-99 season are the Leafs' plans for free agency. How large of a swing is Dryden willing to take, especially as Toronto looks to be shedding the beloved yet aging and expensive Wendell Clark when July 1 hits, likely with less fanfare than last time. There are some genuine pieces floating around despite the pre-lockout necessity for all the UFAs to be in their 30s. There's Doug Gilmour, yeah. There's Benoit Hook, right. There's Jeff Brown, Okay, but aside from those, there are old stars, Ron Francis, Brett Hull, Gary Suter, along with a huge crop of strong goalies, Mike Richter, Sean Burke, Curtis Joseph, and John Van Beesbrook. There seems to be a big internal push for John McLean, a 34-year-old 40-some point guy. Sure, okay. Brett Hull doesn't fall their way. Neither do Francis or Suter. But on the 12th of July, the Leafs land their first big fish of free agency. Steve Tomas. Are you kidding me? He's washed. Tomas came into the league with the Leafs back in the 80s. Since then, he's been a very good player. A 30-40 goal guy with the Blackhawks and Islanders. But over his last 3 seasons, which he spent with the Devils, Thomas's scoring acumen and ice time diminished. From the Toronto Star, "I have a lot of goals left in me," said Tomas. 14 goals and 24 points in 55 games with the defense-first Devils last season. "I like being the go-to guy. I've been a checker the last 3 years, and getting a chance to put more emphasis on offense excites me." Steve, I really hope you're right. But I fear that if you're the go-to guy, the team will not be good. I mean, he's better than John McLean, probably. But on the 15th of July, the Leafs make their most impactful signing of the entire period. And it's one that comes somewhat out of the blue. The Leafs back up the Brinks truck filled with the "we're building a new arena" money to the house of Curtis Joseph. A gargantuan $6 million per year for the next 4 years for the perennial Vezina candidate who spent the last 3 years of his career backstopping mediocre squads in Edmonton. As much as I like Felix Potvin, this is such a seismic upgrade for the Leafs. They're going from a streaky but talented top 15 starter to a top 5, maybe even top 3 netminder in the league. Joseph is the real deal. If he could power the extremely mid Oilers past the all-powerful Avalanche in the playoffs, what can he do for the Leafs? As Joseph is presented to the media, Dryden commences loading the cat into a trebuchet. Felix is gone as anyone has ever been. Mind you, Felix is not bad. I need to emphasize that. He's a good starter. There are only so many of those, and the Leafs are likely to get a haul for him. The Toronto Star puts some potential trade targets together. Winger Alex McGillney or winger Todd Bertuzzi from Vancouver. Defenseman Ed Jovanovski or center Rob Niedermeyer from Florida. Or wingers Brian Savage or Martin Rushinsky from Montreal. Those are legitimate pieces. While I didn't love the addition of Steve Tomas, in a week, the Leafs added a top 6 winger, an elite goalie, and are teed up to add another stud, hopefully someone on the blue line like Jovanovski. Hold on a second. Is this team going to be good? Okay, maybe not good, but competent. This team looks competent, especially if RFA number 1 D-man Matthew Schneider resigns. Schneider is going to resign, right? August rolls by, then September, and the anchor on the Leafs' blue line remains unsigned. It seems likely he'll be sent elsewhere. Luckily, the Leafs traded Felix for a new star on the back end. Felix? What are you still doing here? Ken, we gotta pull the trigger on something, right? Since Schneider's probably gone? This defense doesn't look so hot. But quietly in camp, a few players have allowed the Leafs a bit more patience despite their number 1's absence. Young Danny Markov, who like Sergei Berezin before him was a random late-round Russian flyer from the Fletcher administration, showed some spark at the end of the 1998 season and has continued to look like a genuine NHL defenseman. The Toronto Star's season preview describes him as a delight to watch, saying he shows no fear of and no respect for his opponent. He's like a second Dmitry Yushkevich. Mean, sometimes erratic, but if he matures, he could become a force. 22-year-old sophomore Yanic Tremblay seems poised for a step too, bringing some offensive ability, though possessing some defensive deficiencies. And finally, who are you? You don't even have a headshot. If someone told me this was a picture of Grandpapa before he went off to fight in the Great War, I'd believe them. After being selected in the 8th round of the 1996 draft, Tomas Kaberle gradually rose to power as a teenager in the Czech Men's League. At 19 in 1998, Kaberle was second among HC Kladno's defensemen in points and captained the Czech World Junior team. He played 2 games with the Leafs AHL affiliate in St. John's to end last year, and Toronto expected to send him back to Newfoundland for more seasoning this season, but his training camp was undeniable. Fletcher & Co. hit on yet another random European. Tomas Kaberle looks like the real deal. You know what, Ken? Take your time. Make sure you get someone good for Felix. While despite likely being better in reality than on paper, it is still an extremely young defense core that will rely on Yushkevich and Sylvain Cote. The forward group, however, looks quite good. They lack center depth beyond Sundin, though there is a chance for a leap forward from Steve Sullivan or Alan McCauley. The wings that make up the top 9, Berezin, Tomas, Igor Korolev, Derek King, Mike Johnson, and Freddie Modine, would be a perfectly good assembly for any team. These are all potential 20-goal guys. This team will score, and combine that with a star goaltender. This team has a chance to be decent despite their 60-1 cup odds, a mark only ahead of the expansion Predators' truly horrific Lightning and the what even is going on over there Islanders. Well, hopefully the Leafs will get someone soft out of the gate to warm up. Travel should be easier this season too, since they finally moved to the East thanks to the Predators, plopping into the Northeast Division with the Senators, Bruins, Sabres, and Canadiens, all of whom are between fine and good but not awe-inspiring. No, despite their conference move, the Leafs are still forced to square off against a Western opponent, though luckily, it's at home. Unluckily, it's against the 2-time defending Cup champion Red Wings. And against the league's best team 2 years running, Curtis Joseph slams the door. Though he gives up a power play goal in the first to Larry Murphy, presumably out of courtesy, Cujo stops 38 of Detroit's 39 shots, while goals from Berezin and McCauley give the Leafs an improbable 2-1 win in front of a Nuclear Gardens crowd. Okay, let's calm down. Even when they suck, the Leafs have kind of had Detroit's number. Let's not get carried away with just one game. The first road game of the year is a long trek out to Edmonton in the Cujo revenge game against the Oilers. When Steve Thomas throws a no-look pass to Sundin early in the second to open the scoring, it's clear that these two have something special. The Leafs prevail 3-2 on the back of 2 Sundin goals and another terrific performance by their new franchise goaltender. If anyone still believes Joseph wasn't the upgrade he was touted to be, they remain silent in the wings. After a few days in Banff, the Leafs pulverized the hapless Flames 7-3 in Felix's first action of the season, proving that he too is still good, just not Joseph good. While his team was enjoying the natural beauties of the Great White North, Dryden pulled the trigger on the first of his 2 necessary trades, sending Matthew Schneider to New York for a 4th and defenseman Alexander Karpovtsev. Karpovtsev isn't the minute muncher that Schneider is. He'll never be confused for a number 1, but he's a rock-solid 3-4. He can play every situation, second power play, second penalty kill, and brings a more consistent defensive game than Schneider. There are some questions about the consistency of his compete level, but hopefully that was more an issue of the blasé retirement home Rangers than Karpovtsev himself. This also continues the trend of Toronto's clear push toward European talent, which isn't uncommon among other teams with stars born east of the Atlantic. The Red Wings with Fedorov and Lidstrom surrounded their stars with numerous Russian and Swedish countrymen. The Penguins did the same, loading up on every Czech that knew how to skate to complement Jaromir Jagr, a luxury Czechs on many other teams, like Toronto's Kaberle, rarely enjoy. Though the Leafs' next two games weren't optimal results, a loss to the lifeless Canucks and a tie in Karpovtsev's debut against the Predators, the squad quickly rebounded with another win against the Red Wings and a victory over the Penguins in back-to-back nights. After the win against the Penguins, which was credited more to the struggles of Pittsburgh netminder Peter Skudra than to the Leafs, things were beginning to feel different. At 5-1-1, the Leafs were becoming undeniable, or at least undeniably passable. If the mark of a truly good team is that it can pull victories out of sloppy efforts, then the Maple Leafs have every right to be on top of the NHL standings, said the Toronto Star's Ken Campbell. However, it's the Penguins with a shutout from Skudra that began a rough introduction to the Eastern Conference for the Leafs. Including that loss to the Pens, the Leafs go on a 1-5-1 run, nearly undoing their stellar start. All 5 of the losses and the tie come to their new conference mates, while the win is a shutout against the powerhouse, albeit slow-starting Avs. Where they would have likely continued to look monstrous against the West, there are too many decent teams in the East, the far less top-heavy conference, for the Leafs to separate themselves this early. The defense, though they've exceeded exterior expectations, does seem to need some help. It's missing a certain je ne sais quoi. Felix is, still here. He doesn't want to be. He might even ask his agent to find him a trade. To be fair, he's not being a jerk about it. He just wants to start, and that's not happening in Toronto. And when it has, outside of that first start, he hasn't been good, which is likely slowing the negotiations. Potvin-sourced reinforcements aren't on their way just yet. The Leafs don't need it. The rest of the calendar year, 22 games, the Leafs reach another level. They become actually good. A 10-3 obliteration of the Blackhawks shows just how potent the Leafs offense can be. They are a flamethrower that torches their opposition to the tune of 3.4 goals per game, as Cujo, and sometimes Potvin, allow only 2.5 goals against per game, as the Leafs go 15-7 in the second half of November and December, putting them at 21-13-2 on the year. A record that isn't just fine, but outstanding. Sundin is up over a point per game. Tomas is close to it, winding the clock back 5 years. Basically, every forward on the team is hitting the higher end of what one could have expected in terms of production. Modine, Sullivan, and Berrazin have all reclaimed the spark they seem to have lost under Mike Murphy, though the team does lose their emergent young center Alan McCauley to a knee injury. While the defense can be scary, Yuskevich's game has evolved under Quinn, bringing more offensive punch back to his play that had been dormant since his Flyers days. He's not a classic number 1, but he is this team's anchor. Felix, I see you haven't been Felix? Felix, where'd you go, man? Finally through with waiting, Potvin walked out on the team in early December, leaving the extant Glenn Healy in his place. Will the team be worse off without his distractions keeping the spotlight off the sometimes frightening defense like Damien Cox states in the Toronto Star? I'm not sure about that. But Cox is right that Healy is nowhere near as good as the Cat. The players and fans seem more disappointed that it's come to this than disappointed in Felix's exodus. maybe he'll get traded someday. Toronto seems to really want Michael Renberg. On January 9th, it finally ends. Felix is sent to the Islanders for a 6th-round pick swap and Bryan Berard. It's not the best situation for Felix. The Isles reek, but he'll get to start. Wait, no. The Isles have Tommy Salo, so best case scenario, he'll split starts. I genuinely do not understand what the Isles are doing, ever. Berard is an interesting ad for this Leafs team, to say the least. The 21-year-old former first overall pick is an electric offensive defenseman. He's a groundbreaking skater with stellar vision that can rifle the puck. He ran away with the Calder as a 19-year-old and got some genuine Norris consideration that year. Now last year, as a 20-year-old, he was bad defensively. At least that's what plus minus tells us. He was a minus 32, which, yeah, isn't great. But when you take into account that the Isles gave up a league-leading 16 shorthanded goals and a healthy 10 empty net goals, many of which would have been ticks in the minus column for the hero line staple Berard, that negative 32 isn't so scary. People hate his defense, and we don't have modern analytics to show his deeper effectiveness. Okay, sure, whatever. The talent that he has is something you can't pass up, even if he's not really what your team needs. He'll put one of Markov or Kaberle on the bench, which isn't really optimal. Those guys are pretty good. The Leafs have a bunch of pretty good, though. Berard, despite his punkish reputation, has the ability to be great. Pat Quinn clearly sees the greatness in Berard as the young phenom sees his ice time tick up game after game until he's north of 24 minutes per night, solidly the team's number one. In just his 3rd game with the team, Berard scores a goal and adds 2 assists as the Leafs down the NHL-leading Dallas Stars in a 6-4 firefight. The Leafs' fruitful January puts them in a good position for what will be a whirlwind February. They bid farewell to their legendary Maple Leaf Gardens home on the 13th. The lights shine a bit too brightly for the feisty Leafs as they lose to the subpar Blackhawks. Though fittingly, Doug Gilmour scores the game winner, and the final goal in the Gardens is tallied by Bob Probert, who bludgeoned many a Leaf in the old Norris Division days. On the 16th, the team sends out 4th-liner Darby Hendrickson for some additional depth help on the blue line in the form of Chris McAllister, spelling the end for free agent addition 8th defenseman Dallas Eakins on the big club. There are too many guys on this blue line. They have 4.5 pairings of competent guys. Berard, Cote, Yushkevich, Karpovtsev are basically locked in, but Smith, Kaberle, Markov, McAllister, and Yanic Tremblay all shuffle in and out. Something probably needs to give. The next day, the team cuts bait on Jeff Ware for David Nemirovsky, neither of whom will play another NHL game. Good thing they randomly hit on Markov, it seems, because that 95 draft is looking ugly with the 15th overall pick now out of the system, and 1996 isn't looking much better other than Kaberle. The team moves into the sparkling new Air Canada Centre on the 20th against their newly renewed rival, the Montreal Canadiens. In a better outcome than the Garden send-off, the Leafs defeat the Habs on a Steve Thomas goal. A man who played during the Ballard administration finally putting that era to bed. In terms of wins and losses, February isn't the best month for the Leafs, though they still go 6-4-2, putting them at 34-21-5 on the year, essentially a lock for the playoffs and likely home ice in the first round. Their squad also gets Alan McCauley back, a player they desperately need with their relatively shallow center depth. His absence had caused massive struggles for Johnson and Modine, the latter of whom had replaced McCauley on the shelf with injury. While this team is officially good, it does seem like just a couple of injuries up front could completely sink them, especially to any of their centers, or flex center Igor Korolev. They need someone to step up, or they need an ad, and I think the second option is more likely, as I'm not exactly high on Lonnie Bahanas as the solution here. But they have Macaulay back, so for now, we're good. The first game of March is against the Devils, a loss for the Leafs, but that isn't the worst news. Sheldon Surrey crushed Alan Macaulay into the boards. The young Leaf, who had struggled with concussions throughout his career, lost consciousness for minutes and left the game on a stretcher. He's done for the year. The target for the Leafs at the deadline is now obvious. They need a center. From the Macaulay injury to the deadline late in March, Quinn rides Sundin, playing him over 20 minutes per night, peaking at 25-58 in an overtime loss to the Rangers. An injury to Igor Korolev, the spot center, has made the situation even more dire up the middle. The Leafs' big target is Trevor Linden, who would be a terrific fit for this team. He plays a 200-foot game, and though he doesn't have the offensive oomph he once had, if he's stuffed on the second line, he'll be a guy that can contribute. And hey, he's an Islander. You can probably rip off Milbury again. If they can't get him, Damian Cox proposes that they settle for the decomposing corpse of Dale Hunter. Really? The Leafs are kicking the tires on it, apparently. Guys, he doesn't have a goal. He's playing 8 minutes per night for the Capitals. I don't know if he'd be the help this team needs. On deadline day, the Leafs, despite their sub-500 record in March, are still clearly in buyer's mode. But their first move is to sell. There really isn't room for all these defensemen, and Jason Smith is the casualty of that fact. The Leafs send their nasty but offensively deficient defenseman to Edmonton for a fair price of a second and a fourth. I mean, it is what it is. Jason Smith is solid, but he's ultimately, like so many other defensemen on this team, just pretty good. I mean, what's he going to do? Captain the Oilers to a cup final? The Leafs opt not for Linden or Hunter. They instead pull the trigger on a third option. The asks for the likes of Linden, Joe Juneau, Vincent Damphousse, and yes, even apparently Dale Hunter, were the Leafs' young core guys, Johnson, Macaulay, Kaberle, or Antropov. Toronto, for seemingly the first time, exercises discretion, not mortgaging the future on year one of being any good at all. Sending mid-tier prospect Jason Potvin and a third-round pick to Los Angeles, the Leafs reacquire their 1991 third-round pick, Yanic Perreault. Perreault is the epitome of a secondary scorer. You can sit him on your second line and top power play, and he will score 20 to 25 goals every year. Paul Hunter critiques Perreault's defense in his write-up about the trade in the Toronto Star, and no shade to Paul, I think he's incorrect. Hunter is saying Perreault is bad defensively because then coach Pat Burns didn't like Perreault's defense 5 years ago. And, you know, it's the 90s, Paul probably isn't watching a ton of Kings games. I'm not even sure he has ESPN Plus, or Sportsnet Panopticon, or whatever the hell you have up there. So I don't blame him for being mistaken, but Perreault can play defense. He's a threat when his team is shorthanded, and while we don't have the face-off stats for this era, Yanic will quickly build a reputation as one of the best draw takers in the league. Perreault is exactly what this team needs. Yes, he's not a big, slow defender or friggin' Dale Hunter, but this team is trying to play fast. They're trying to get at least slightly less old. Perreault, while not a speedster himself, won't slow the team down and will actively make them better. The Leafs' newest addition scores in his first game, but his biggest impact comes on an April 7th game against the provincial rival Ottawa Senators. Perreault scores all 4 of Toronto's goals in a victory, including one on each of the special teams units. After he scored just 10, 17, and 27 in 64 games with the Kings, Perreault racked up a scoring line of 7, 8, and 15 in just 12 games with the Leafs. You know what? I think it's working out. The Leafs finished their regular season with 97 points in the standings, their highest mark since 1994, but that was an 84-game season instead of 82. By points percentage, the 99 team is the best the city has seen since 1962. Very quietly, very good. Mats Sundin obviously led the team in points with 83, though he didn't lead them in goals. Thanks to a scorching second half, Sergei Berezin took that crown with 37 as the Russian sniper blossomed into a star. Steve Thomas's 73 points outpaced even the most optimistic expectations for a guy in his mid-30s. Derek King, Sullivan, and Johnson all scored 20 goals. Had he not broken his finger, Korolev would have easily broken 50 points. Berard's 5 goals and 19 points in his 38 games with the Leafs showed that he is a key member of this team going forward. And of course, Cujo posted a .910 save percentage, tying Potvin's career best marker and doing so behind a far weaker defensive team. This is a team that can score and get a save. They say defense wins championships, and that is not this team. But this team is still very, very good. While the Leafs' 97 points were the third highest total in the Eastern Conference, it was the second highest total in the Northeast Division, meaning the Hurricanes of the horrific and will be horrific for basically its entire existence Southeast Division supplant the Leafs for the third seed. But still, the Leafs get home ice in round 1 as the 4. Their opponent for their first playoff game in nearly 3 years, the loathsome Philadelphia Flyers. Okay, to be fair, now 2 years removed from the Potvin-Hextall fight, this isn't really the nastiest iteration of the Flyers. Unfortunately for southeastern Pennsylvanians, to talk about the 99 Flyers, you must start with the guy that's missing from the lineup. Eric Lindros, the Flyers' superstar center, dealt with injuries all year, but nearly dying from a collapsed lung and internal bleeding suffered in a late-season game against the Predators is what currently has the Giant laid low. Expecting Lindros to be available for the playoffs at the time, the Flyers went all in at the trade deadline, loading up on talent with the hope of their colossal captain bringing them a Stanley Cup. Despite the literally huge hole in their lineup, the Flyers will not be an easy out. Matchup mastermind Rod Brindamore has taken over the 1C and Jersey C duties from Lindros, and while he's not the same dominant offensive force, he can score and will likely jump the boards every time Sundin touches the ice. John LeClaire and deadline addition Mark Recchi are the other true stars at forward. LeClaire, a huge loping goal scorer, and Recchi, the quicker, feisty play driver. While the Leafs tried their hardest to obtain him, the Flyers ended up reacquiring Michael Renberg, who, while not as good as he was in the Legion of Doom days, can still contribute on a second line. He came to town alongside Damon Langkow, who, while a third-line center by trade, has been forced into a bigger role by the Lindros injury. Dependable Keith Jones rounds out the upper half of the forward group. There is not much beyond those guys. Valery Zelepukin's 16 goals represent the only player to tally double digits in the Flyers' depth, though they did add former Leafs and Flyers face puncher Craig Berube to glare at people from the bench and give a few face washes. The defense has less star power, but number 1 Eric Desjardins is legit, a perennial second-tier Norris candidate. He's never going to win, but some people will throw him a 4th place vote year in and year out. Dan McGillis, their other power play producer on the blue line, is a big, consistent defender that can pass and shoot. The towering Chris Therien is the matchup middle pair guy, and the deadline acquisition of Steve Duchesne brought more mobility to the unit. Yet 2 more midseason adds, Carl Dykhuis and Adam Burt, round out the unit. It's a group that, while not thrilling, is hard to get through. This team's weak link, the Philadelphia Flyers story, is clearly their goaltending, which was a full percentage point worse than league average. They rely on old man John Van Beesbrook, who is not so good anymore. His 2.19 goals against average versus his .902 save percentage really portrays how poor he's been versus how good the defensive squad in front of him has been. You know how many times he faced more than 30 shots in a game this season? Hint, he played in 62 games. 3 games. There are not better clutchers and grabbers in all of the dead puck world than the Flyers. Though Beezer seems washed, you only need to look back to 1996 at his tremendous run with the Panthers to see what this guy can do when he's hot. With Lindros absent, this matchup is set to be the unstoppable force of Toronto's number one scoring offense against the immovable object that is the hulking Flyers. Quinn opts for a heavier lineup, going with Chris McAllister over Tomas Kaberle for Game 1, though he does have a returning Igor Korolev to boost the offense. And the game goes as badly for the Leafs as possible. Therrien and Desjardins suffocate Sundin, with his only real scoring chance coming on a penalty shot early in the third. When tested, Beezer stands tall, and the Flyers slam the door on the Leafs 3-0. The Leafs have absolutely nothing going, and, Igor Korolev played less than 8 minutes, broke his fibula, and is back on the shelf for the foreseeable future. In the first period of Game 2, as a spinning, twisting Keith Jones gives the Flyers the lead, it already feels over. This team isn't ready. They need something. Maybe it's Sundin's fault. Maybe they should have gone with more good Canadian boys. Deep into the third period it goes, and Van Beesbroek remains unbeatable. But to the joy of every whinging old dude in rural Ontario, a good Canadian, British boy takes the Leafs' fate into his own hands. Air Canada Centre explodes for the first great moment of its playoff existence. Any critics saying the pristine new building would never replicate the energy of the Garden fall silent, until presumably they too are launched from their seats a minute later. Sundin took a lot of criticism following Game 1, but here he is, once again, leading his Leafs forward. Despite Bob Cole's potentially jinxing call, the Leafs, with the help of their lockdown pair of Russians, Sundin, Perreault, Tomas, and of course Cujo, cling to their lead to steal a crucial Game 2 before heading to Philadelphia. In Game 3, Carl Dijkhuis of the Flyers opens the scoring before immediately getting beaten by the heavily criticized Mike Johnson to tie the game at 1, all just 10 seconds after the last scoreboard update. It's again Tomas on a power play slapshot to give the Leafs the advantage early in the second. While Game 2 saw Sundin rise to the occasion, Game 3 is all about the team's other superstar. Joseph dominates the Flyers, allowing just 1 goal on 41 shots, earning the Leafs yet another grinding 2-1 win. The 2-1 series lead isn't without its victims, as a battered Karpovtsev is forced out of the lineup, replaced by the hopefully fresh Kaberle. The first period of Game 4 is the first and possibly only time this series opens up, as the two offenses trade punches both literally and metaphorically. Berube, then Berezin, then Leclerc, then Sullivan, and a special teams bonanza. That continues early in the second as Ty Domi, for no real reason, mugs Flyers equivalent Sandy McCarthy. Eric Desjardins scores on the subsequent power play to give Philadelphia a lead they don't relinquish, eventually winning 5-2. One would have thought a faster pace of play would favor the younger, smaller Leafs, but no. To win this series, the Leafs will have to play tough, grinding Flyers hockey or pray for their goalie to brute force them through. The Leafs choose the latter option. That choice initially results in Keith Jones giving the Flyers the lead less than 2 minutes into the first of Game 5. Luckily for the Leafs, their blind squirrel power play started to find some nuts back in Game 4, and Dmitry Yushkevich locks the game back up before the period's halfway point. Then it all grinds to a halt. Not in terms of chances. Both teams have plenty, but the two goaltenders, as they have through the entire series, sparkle. The Leafs, in particular, have just 7 goals, through 4 full games and regulation of a 5th. Strangely, 3 of those 7 goals have come from bad angle backhand shots. Have you thought about trying that again? Yanic Perreault has brought so much to this team as a stopper and as a scorer. He's given them a true third line that should have died with the losses of Macaulay and Korolev. He's playing with the relatively pedestrian Gary Volk and Todd Warner. Yet, it's been maybe the best bottom 6 offering the Leafs have had all season. That stems from Perreault. What an addition. After the faster-paced goalie show that was Game 5, the teams opt for a chess match in Philadelphia as the home team faces elimination. While the shots are relatively low and even, the Flyers get the better of the chances and look to have their first goal all sewn up as Joseph catches an edge while playing the puck behind the net. It's Berard, seen as a black hole defensively, who makes the save of the game. The matchup winds deep into the third, where, with 3 minutes left, John LeClair makes a critical error. The man who somewhat inexplicably gets regular Lady Bing votes chicken wings Mike Johnson in the head behind the Flyers' net. He heads to the box, with his team's season hanging in the balance. After a minute and a half of ineffective offense, Berard tries to do it all himself. He fails on 2 shots, the second of which hits Flyers defenseman Adam Burt well out of line with the net, but off of Burt, the puck spins right to Sergei Berezin.
Score! Sergei Berezin on the power play!
The Flyers have only 60 seconds to respond. Recchi, Jones, LeClair, and Brind'Amour lead the charge. They get their chances, but nothing was getting past Cujo tonight. The Leafs win the series, headed to the second round for the first time since 1994. An elated Joseph lobs his blocker and glove into the sky and embraces his most dependable assistant, Yuskevich. The Flyers did what they needed to do. They took Sundin completely out of the equation aside from his 1 game-winning goal, just 2 points in 6 games. But the Leafs still prevailed. Few shreds of the last time the Leafs were trying to win remain. It's the new faces that won them this series. Berard factoring in on over half of the Leafs' goals. Tomas, Perreault, and even young Danny Markov help this team survive. But undoubtedly, the brightest star was Joseph. Sundin no longer needed to shoulder all of the weight. Toronto is a hockey town with 2 superstars now. And 2 superstars that have plenty of help. This team could go places. Entering the second round, the Leafs see the devastation that has befallen their top-seeded conference mates. Least shocking was the 3-seeded, but actually 8th best team in the conference, Carolina Hurricanes, falling to the Boston Bruins with their double barrel of towering centers, Jason Allison and Joe Thornton, and the ageless Raymond Bourque. The Northeast Division champion Senators saw their star goalie Ron Tugnutt implode as his direct competitor, the 2-time defending MVP Dominik Hasek, stopped more than 96% of Ottawa's shots in a 4-game Sabres sweep. The largest of the upsets befell the Devils, who, thanks in part to the worst performance of Martin Brodeur's playoff career, dropped a 7-game series to the actively destitute Penguins, who, had they lost the series, were likely on their way out of Pittsburgh. The Pens, while weaker on paper than the Flyers by essentially any metric, are the most ravenous, scrappy team left in the playoffs. They are slated as the Leafs' next opponent. Like the Flyers, the Penguins also relied heavily on a superstar, and like the Flyers, they were without that star in parts of round 1. Jaromir Jagr, clearly the NHL's best non-goalie, was injured in Game 1 against the Devils. His team held on in his absence, but were still down 3-2 when he returned for Game 6. A clearly still wounded Jagr ripped the series from the Devils, scoring not just to tie Game 6 in its 57th minute, but to win it in overtime as well. He tacked on 2 primary assists in Game 7. He is dominant, and like his predecessor Mario Lemieux, possesses the ability to just take over, and there is nothing you can do to stop him. The main guys who kept the Penguins afloat in Jágr's absence were the dazzlingly skilled Alex Kovalev and the speedy, tenacious breakout star Martin Straka, who you may remember as a throw-in headed to the Islanders from the Sens in the Wendell Clark trade. These two racked up 4 and 6 goals to go with 10 and 11 points respectively against the Devils, combining to score more goals than the whole high-powered Leafs offense did against the Flyers. The rest of the Pens' entirely European top 6 features former Soviet League star and Calgary Flame Herman Titov, late bloomer Rob Lang, and the young but talented Jan Hrdina. Now for the rest of the team, and you will see how such a loaded top 6 ended up sitting in 8th place come playoff time. Center Kip Miller, member of the Michigan State-produced Miller clan, was a bit of bargain bin gold when the Penguins got 19 goals out of him after claiming him in the waiver draft back in October. Robbie Brown tumbled out of the league before the Leafs made their conference final in 1993, spending time as a star in the oft-forgotten IHL, but has somehow made his way back to being a moderate contributor on a team he once scored 49 goals and 115 points for. Alexei Morozov is young and skilled, but not much of a contributor yet, and other than the maniacal Matthew Barnaby, the Pens' fourth line might as well not even dress. The defense is led by good number 1 Kevin Hatcher. That's essentially the whole unit. Brad Wawrinka and Yuri Slager are decent, I guess. They're without their best shutdown man in the violent Darius Kasparaitis, so Ian Moran is now in the top 4 on the blue line after spending a good portion of the season at right wing. Greg Andrusak and Bobby Dallas exist, or so I am told. In net, the other remnant of Pittsburgh's Stanley Cup rosters aside from Jágr, veteran Tom Barrasso. Despite a career renaissance in 1998, after missing nearly all of 1995 and 1997 to injury, Barrasso was just okay in 1999. He's a below-average starter with some playoff pedigree, though he was merely good, not great against the Devils, posting a .913 save percentage. While the Flyers ground the Leafs to a halt, the offense-centered Penguins are inviting the Leafs to a gunfight. Game 1 is not that. It's a slog. The only goal against a goalie comes from, of all people, Dan Kessa. I didn't even mention him in the intro. Where am I? No. He's Milan Lucic's uncle. The Leafs get shut out by Barrasso and fall 2-0 against hobbled Jágr and his Penguins. The thought starts to arise. Maybe it wasn't the Flyers clamping him down. Maybe Sundin just isn't showing up. Pat Quinn, disenchanted with Freddie Modine, opts to take him out of the lineup and instill a new line mate to put with Sundin. Lonnie Bahanas? Are we for real? I mean, he's been pretty good when he's been in the lineup, I guess, but he has almost no experience. Bahanas tacked on with Sundin and Tomas makes his impact immediately, scoring Game 2's first goal. Sundin, who assisted on the Bahanas goal, is finally resuscitated and he takes over. The captain nets the Leafs' next 2 goals, assists on Steve Thomas's coffin nail late in the third, and levels the ailing Jágr in open ice. While yes, Cujo and Barrasso have each shined in a game, this series is a duel between the 2 European superstars, and Game 3 is Jágr's chance to punch back. While the game stays scoreless until nearly its midpoint, the latter half of the second is finally the fast-paced war we've been hoping for. Mike Johnson starts the run off a feed from Derek King. A drawn penalty from the Kraft's master Matthew Barnaby puts the Penguins up where they score? I don't think the puck crossed the line here, guys. I also don't think it was Kevin Hatcher who hammered it in. It should be Rob Brown's goal, I think. I mean, granted, I'm sure the video guys have better footage than me, but I mean, I guess it's hard to say either way. But especially weird to call it a goal when it wasn't signaled that way on the ice. If you care, the referee tonight is Kerry Fraser, who I heard Leafs fans really like. Regardless, the game is tied. for about a minute and a half. Derek King mosses Brad Wawrinka to give the Leafs the lead back. The Leafs have needed more out of King. After he was 4th on the team in both goals and points in the regular season, he disappeared against the Flyers. He seems to have finally returned. But Dishmaster Robbie Brown is at it again, feeding Bobby Dallas to tie the game just 26 seconds after the Leafs goal. It takes Adam Mayer, the Leafs' rookie 4th liner in his first NHL game thanks to an injury to Steve Sullivan, just 13 seconds to respond. Now in 2025, goalie interference. But it's 1999, baby, so the Leafs are up 3-2 heading into the third. But with the Penguins on the power play with 11 minutes to go, thanks to a Sundin trip, Brown won't let his team go down so easily. Oh yeah, and that Jágr fella's pretty good too. Moments later, a magnetic Kovalev draws in both Cote and Domi before whipping the puck to Yuri Slager, who makes the pump fake of his life. While the Leafs attempt to bombard Barrasso, Jan Hrdina makes a few key blocks to secure a Penguins victory. While Jágr gives cheerful quotes about his improving health to the media after the game, Ken Dryden, a man who knows a thing or two about pucks not crossing the line, seethes over the Penguins' first goal. During the game, he even ran to the video official's press box, where he slammed on the door and then was locked out. A fair response, honestly, for a goal I still do not understand. Well, it was nice having footage for a game, now back to the 144p CNN highlights. Game 4 in the raucous Civic Arena, it's of course Jágr to open the scoring. But the Pens didn't account for Sundin's new sidekick causing them ill once again. Lonnie Bohannes assists on a Sundin tire before netting one of his own early in the third. Brad Wawrinka ties the game, sending it to overtime, where the Leafs have a face-off in the Penguins' zone. With Perreault at the dot, it's academic. The Leafs hold possession, and the puck tumbles behind a wandering, then wiped-out Barrasso, and Berezin strikes. Tie series. The already shallow Penguins were without the services of both of their Alexeys and Titov, leaving them much easier prey for the similarly battered Leafs. While Titov returns for Game 5, the Penguins are still missing Morozov and, more notably, Kovalev. The Leafs easily handle the Penguins 4-1 at home with goals from Sylvain Cote and common scorers Johnson, Tomas, and Berezin, as the Penguins desperately miss their third 20-minute forward. The Pittsburgh fans file into Civic Arena ahead of what may be the final hockey game of their team's existence in Game 6, but the sempiternal Leafs can have no mercy. The Pens come out roaring in the first, boosted by the crowd and reinsertion of Kovalev. The Leafs, who have been torturously undisciplined, put Pittsburgh on the power play early in the first, where the Mullets make them pay. Toronto is on its heels all period, assumedly intimidated by the gargantuan task of not just killing a team's playoff hopes, but the whole franchise. A dancing Kovalev is the next to strike, putting the Leafs down 2-0 after the first. In the second, the Leafs show some life. Mike Johnson scores once again and, foot in the crease from rookie Kevin Adams. What a weird rule. Hopefully that's the last time that comes up this year. Well, that was their chance. Time for the Leafs to no-show. Really show their true colors by rolling over and dying. 2 words. Lonnie Bohannes.
Sundin was slow getting started, but now he gets it down to Bohannes. He scores!
What a laser with a wooden stick. I didn't even know that was possible. In a matter of seconds, Gary Volk ties the game on what I would call less of a goal and more a sequence of confusion. Did Volk cast a spell to make everyone fall down? Either way, tie game. Just like in overtime of Game 4, the Leafs have an offensive zone face-off to Barrasso's left. Perreault and Berezin line up for their set play in the same way. In Game 4, Berezin hit the crossbar. In Game 6, he doesn't. After an offside call, the Kaberle and Cote pairing finds itself out against the Jágr line, a matchup the Leafs had been trying to avoid, chasing the Czech with Juszkiewicz. And here's why.
Miller centered on score! Yanic!
The third period slows the game to a slog. 1999 dead puck, clutching and grabbing and such. All only amplified by the refs swallowing the whistles given the game situation. The bland third births overtime. Offensive zone face-off. Perreault. The Leafs are moving on.
And a shot. Barrasso down. Score!
Gary Volk, with his second of the game, has sent the Penguins packing their bags for Kansas City. These Leafs have that killer instinct. They won't just roll over. In the conference final, the Leafs will face their opposite. While the Leafs are a high-octane offense happy to win games 4-3, their opponent would prefer every game finished with a soccer score. Toward Toronto for Game 1, limp the Buffalo Sabres. Long in their regional sibling shadow, the Sabres do not like the Leafs. Toronto fans are very likely to make the easy drive across the border and infest Marine Midlands Arena, and that has become a yet more frequent occurrence now that the two teams share a conference. But despite being the little brother, the Sabres have been the far more successful team of late, reaching this very round just last year where they fell to the Capitals. And this is mostly a better version of that same team. It's not an especially talented team when you look at their skaters, though they are fairly deep. Forward Miro Shatan is far and away their best offensive threat, but he was hurt against Boston and will miss the start of the Leafs series. Captain Mike Pekka is one of the best two-way centers in the league and is a regular 20-goal scorer. Either he or fellow Selke candidate Curtis Brown will be the wet blanket the Sabres attempt to throw on Sundin. With Shatan out, Michael Grosek is the team's best remaining wing, at least in theory, but the big check has been ice cold in the playoffs. Luckily for the Sabres, wingers Vaclav Varada, Dixon Ward, and Jeff Sanderson have stepped up in his place. The team has also gotten plenty of help from its bottom six, with gritty Brian Holzinger, the lesser primo Wayne, and rookie Eric Rasmussen, each having scored, which for this team is a pretty big contribution. To elevate their scoring punch, the Sabres did add at the trade deadline to largely disappointing results. Former 100-point rookie and foil to the Sabres last spring, Joe Juneau, was non-existent for the team in his 9 regular season games, though in the playoffs he has finally turned it around, notching 9 points in 9 playoff games. More disastrous has been the addition of Stu Barnes, who the Sabres acquired from the Penguins for Matthew Barnaby and quickly realized they did not also trade for Jaromir Jagr. Barnes mustered just 4 assists in 17 regular season games with the Sabres after scoring 20 goals in his first 64 games with the Penguins. His ice time has taken a hit in the playoffs so far, resulting in even worse production, as he's managed just 1 assist in 10 playoff games. Overall, especially without the 40-goal scoring Shatan, this is not an offense the Leafs should be particularly afraid of. The defense isn't exciting either, but they're extremely effective. Alexei Zhitnik is the clear number 1 and a true two-way contributor, both laying thunderous hits and scoring big goals. Then the lockdown trio of Zhitnik's partner, Richard Smelik, and the plus machine of veteran 23 and 21-year-olds Rhett Warrener and Jay McKee. Jason Woolley is the team's sheltered power play specialist, sharing the ice at 5-on-5 with 1987 Norris candidate James Patrick. But the skaters aren't what makes this team great. It's their goalie. The 2-time defending MVP, the superstar, the best player in the league, the dominator. Dwayne Rollison. Wait, where's Hasek? Despite gracing the front page of the Toronto Star's sports section, Hasek is unavailable to the Sabres to start the series in Toronto due to a nagging groin injury. "Rolly's in," said Ruff unceremoniously prior to Game 1. Going from Hasek to his mediocre 23-year-old backup is a seismic swing in the Leafs' favor. The Sabres can't bring enough goal support to do this. Without Shatan, with Barnes sucking, no chance. Goodbye, Buffalo, we hardly knew ye. The Leafs even have Steve Sullivan back to give them a real second line instead of Kevin Adams trying his best. The Leafs own the early goings in Game 1, and Berard just scored. It's a huge lapse from the Leafs' top pairing with a failed clear from Markov and a completely blown cover by Yuskevich. But the Leafs don't roll over. They turn to their dynamic duo. With just 9 seconds between goals, it feels like even when the Sabres have some offense, the Leafs will be there to punch them in the gut in response. But Dixon Ward reestablishes Buffalo's lead with a whip from the point, the sound of the shot hitting the post ringing out over Hasek's injury explanation interview.
And he was ready since yesterday. He's going to play, so I think, I believe, he played a couple games.
Early in the second, the Sabres shoot themselves in the foot, performing the rare stunt of taking 2 minor penalties at the same time. It takes approximately 1 billion shots, but Sundin finally ties the game on the 5-on-3. Having not had enough of putting 2 guys in the box at the same time, Buffalo follows up coincidental minors from Woolley and Johnson with a double minor for high sticking by Juneau. Berard hammers one home for his first of the playoffs. Buffalo, on a power play of their own, knot the game back up thanks to, of all people, Stu Barnes in what continues to be a nightmare game for the Leafs' Russian pair. A gaff behind the net in the third by Kaberle, who performed well enough after coming in for Karpovtsev in the Flyers series to keep a spot in the lineup, gives Buffalo a 4-3 lead. It's Lonnie time. Seconds after Lonnie's post, the Sabres lengthen their lead with what you can either consider a masterful goal by Sanderson or a horrific goal allowed by Joseph. While Berard rips a shot off Steve Tomas to bring it within 1, Rolison and company hold strong to rob the Leafs of what felt like a guaranteed win in Game 1. Wonder what Damian Cox is going to say about this. He blames Cujo, which, honestly, as a Cujo fan, is fair. He was not good. He also calls the ACC ice surface disgraceful, which, while true, is a funny way to put it. Emphatic on not falling behind 2-0, the Leafs rain hellfire on the Sabres before Steve Sullivan puts them up, and a breakaway from, somehow, Sylvain Cote makes it 2-0 in the first of Game 2. While Barnes puts one on a tee for Woolley to cut into the deficit, offensive zone faceoff, Yanic, Perreault, Sergei Berezin, you know how this goes by now. In the third, Perreault, having already played his hits from the Penguins series, throws it back to round 1 with an odd angle backhand goal. 2 quick goals by Stu Barnes makes the game more exciting in the third. Man, what is going on with that guy? I'm sorry, have you guys checked the clock recently? Oh, would you look at the time? Lonnie! 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 Gary Volk ices the game, and the Leafs avoid disaster heading to Buffalo with a new 5-game series ahead of them. But in Buffalo, the healing winds of Lake Erie do their work. Back into the lineup are Miroslav Shatan and Dominik Hasek. What should have been a waltz for the Leafs is now an uphill battle. The invading Toronto faithful is treated early thanks to an opening goal by Perreault, which takes the team to the second with the lead. Though Miro Shatan makes his presence known, tying the game early in the second frame, the Sabres immediately take a penalty, offering the Leafs their lead back. The Leafs say, "No thanks." After Juneau's goal, Sundin puts Buffalo on the power play, which has been unstoppable all playoffs. Fueled by the crowd projecting Stu, Barnes scores his 4th of the series and 4th as a Sabre. Karpovtsev cuts into the lead with a power play goal later in the second, but doesn't prevent Curtis Brown from icing the game into an empty net. The Leafs use the game's remaining moments trying to get under Hasek's skin, but to no avail. They fall behind in the series 2-1. From Dixon Ward's shorty late in the first, Game 4 is never in doubt. Holzinger, freaking Rob Ray, Jeff Sanderson twice, 5-0 Buffalo. Enough to get Joseph yanked for Glenn Healy. Sundin scores a couple in garbage time, but the game was over long before then. Ahead of the team's next game, Lonnie Bohannes is scratched for Freddie Modin as Quinn searches for something to help his team. The emotions of the elimination Game 5 are minimized by a scoreless first period, but just moments into the second, one of the GOATs, pejorative, of Game 4 comes through for the Leafs. I mean, technically, incredible chip by Yanic, but still. 1-0 Leafs against a team that, in theory, struggles playing from behind. After another terrible Leafs power play where it feels like the Sabres get the better of the chances, Brown surges up the ice and postage stamps a backhand over Joseph to tie the game. The Leafs, despite their inadequacies, keep fighting, leading to a goal from their least likely goal scorer.
Fired up the net, around the goal. Campbell scores!
But another Buffalo power play sucks the energy back out of the building as Verada ties the game back up. In the third, it's Verada again, off another failed clearance from Danny Markov, giving the Sabres the lead. Luckily for the Leafs, an irate Joseph was correct that Verada kicked the puck into the net and the game stays tied for about another 2 minutes. Eric Rasmussen, off another badly redirected rebound by Joseph, gives the Sabres the lead. Hasek slams the door, and Ward scores another shorthanded goal, this one into an empty net, to bring the Leafs' miracle season to a bitter end. The Leafs' anchors that had supported them all playoffs, the Russian top pair and Cujo, buckled in the conference final, and the whole team collapsed on top of them. After he drug the team past the Flyers and shut down the Penguins, it wouldn't be unfair to point at Joseph as the main reason this team fell so easily to the Sabres. But the Leafs weren't even supposed to make the playoffs this year. They were supposed to suck, or at the very most be mediocre. They were good, very good, and have a foundation moving forward. Next year, they'll get more out of Modin, Johnson, Sullivan, Berard, and Kaberle. This team, while they have a lot of veterans, had a lot of guys playing in the playoffs for the first time, and they fought to the conference finals. That's something to build on. They'll soon have Perreault signed. They'll get Korolev back. They'll get Macaulay back. All this team needs is to add a little around the outside, and they'll be right back here in the conference final next year. As the Sabres fall to the Stars in the Cup final, the Leafs enter off-season mode. And with the first major move of said off-season, Dryden fires his chief deputy Mike Smith. Smith had been the main deal maker for the Leafs last season, with Dryden mostly as a figurehead. So the move is certainly unexpected and certainly chafes Pat Quinn. The worry is that now, without Smith, the Leafs will miss out on important negotiating time with the league's top free agents, namely the season's star free agent Theo Fleury. In yet another expansion draft, this one to Atlanta, the Leafs lose the rarely played Yanic Tremblay. And at the actual draft, a typically eventful game for the Leafs, Toronto simply makes their picks and goes home. With their 24th overall selection, Swiss center Luca Serreta serving as the headliner. Beyond Fleury, 1999 doesn't offer much as a free agent class, at least compared to 1998. But as Theo goes to the Rangers, the Leafs still look to add some pieces. Greg Andrusak will serve as a depth defenseman for the team, but the only full-time NHLer the Leafs add is forward Jonas Höglund, who has offered diminishing returns since his 1997 rookie season in Calgary, managing just 8 goals and 18 points with the Canadiens last season. He's a big Swede. Maybe Sundin can get something out of him. This isn't the Leafs I know. Where's the big stupid move? The Leafs largely stay the course, opting to re-sign restricted free agents as opposed to hunting big game, getting contracts done with the likes of Yushkevich and Berard, and bringing back UFA playoff hero Gary Volk. Even just this leaves the Leafs slightly over budget, So ahead of the season, they set themselves up for fiscal moves. They shipped Freddie Modin to Tampa, bringing back rock-solid defenseman Corey Cross in return. Adding Cross gives the Leafs the flexibility to move out one of Sylvain Cote or Alexander Karpovtsev, both of whom make north of $1 million per year, and one of whom would make for a very expensive third pairing guy. But that's really it. This is an extremely similar team to last year, and after the magic of 1999, it's worth running it back in 2000. The Leafs' first 3 games of the season are all wins as they allow a combined 2 goals. Jonas Höglander has been an instant match with Sundin and an upgrade over Bohannes, who, after losing his job in the preseason, will never return to the NHL. As expected, the Leafs part ways with Sylvain Cote on October 8th, which nets them a 2001 second-round pick. After an iffier run of 2 and 3, the Leafs really start to make up for lost time with moves. Derek King, who hit the skids last spring and never really recovered, is dispatched to St. Louis for farmhand defenseman Tyler Halton. On that same day, the Leafs get a huge windfall, sending just a second-round pick to Boston for their holding out 70-point winger Dmitry Kristich. Though he was loathed by Boston GM Harry Sinden, Kristich is a terrific get for the Leafs. He is always north of 20 goals and always north of 60 points. That's the worst case scenario. He also has experience playing with giant playmaking centers like Sundin, playing mostly with Jason Allison in Boston. There is a secondary price to the addition of Kristich, though. With no room and a scoring role left for him, the Leafs waive the beleaguered Steve Sullivan, who had just 1 assist in 7 games. The young forward is gleefully scooped up by the subpar Blackhawks and inserted immediately into their top 6. So in the month of October, the Leafs lost Modin, Cote, King, and Sullivan, and added Corey Cross and Dmitry Kristich to their active roster. I think that's an upgrade. But in terms of sheer volume, that's 64 goals from last season out the door. Though 24 of those were from King, who sucks now. Apprehensions are subdued by the emergence of Nick Antropov, who has slotted comfortably into this forward group as a teenager. McCauley is back from his concussions too. There just wasn't room for Sullivan. Plus, Kristich is scorching out of the gate with 3 goals in his first 3 games with the Leafs, as Toronto finished an eventful first month 9-3-1, 10 games of which were without Sundin. November isn't quite as dominant as the team goes 5-4-2-2, but still, sitting at 14-7-5, the team can now take the regular season as a given. They do move on from the long-tenured Todd Warrener, sending him to join Freddie Modin in Tampa for a third. December is another 9-win month as the team continues to dominate with a 23-9-4-2 record. I hate how the NHL does points pre-lockout, but whatever. The Leafs are first in the conference at New Year's. They even did it without Perreault for most of the month after Tom Barrasso chopped his arm in half. Was it Kristich picking up the slack? No, not really. He's been fine enough, but not the force the Leafs had hoped for. Kristich needs a top-notch center to play off of, and with Höglander and Tomas glued to Sundin, Perreault, Korolev, and Antropov haven't been able to get the most out of the talented Russian winger, who now looks likely to finish behind the red-hot Steve Sullivan in points on the year. Inversely, Thomas Kaberle has surprised no one by taking a massive step forward this season, emerging from the Leafs' number 6 to sitting behind only Yuskevich in ice time and playing significantly more minutes on the power play. At just 21, he looks to be a lock as a 10-goal, 40-point guy, or maybe even better. I mean, this team is great and all, but what if? What if just one more time the Leafs brought back Wendell Clark? By the new millennium, Wendell Clark was completely broken down. It seemed to come on suddenly because just last year in 1999, he had scored 32 goals between the Lightning and Red Wings. But the 33-year-old hit a wall with the Blackhawks in the fall of '99, leading to him being bought out and released by the team after just 2 goals in 13 games. So, in mid-January, with no reason not to do it, the Leafs signed free agent Wendell Clark. Will he contribute? Probably not much, if at all, but he can grind. And you know what? He's a good leader and a good guy. The Leafs have kept Glenn Haley for 3 years now on the same merits, so why not Wendell? With Wendell, this team feels more than just good. They feel destined. While the Wendell signing is nice and cheerful, January isn't the best hockey-playing month for the Leafs, who are racked with injuries, missing Berezin, Karpovtsev, and Markov for meaningful amounts of time. So sparse on defense are the Leafs that in early February they add the decrepit Gerald Diduck. The team clearly feels like they need something to recapture their early season magic, so they make a hockey trade. The talented but frustrating Mike Johnson, along with meh prospect Marek Posmic and a cadre of late-round picks, are sent to, that's right, the Tampa Bay Lightning in exchange for different picks and Darcy Tucker. Tucker is much smaller than Johnson, 3 inches and 24 pounds smaller to be exact, but he is significantly nastier. While he can fight, he's not a brawler like Domi or Chris King. He's an instigator, more in the vein of Matthew Barnaby, but with much more offensive prowess. It's a combination of sandpaper and skill the Leafs very much did not have before the trade. And if it means anything to you, he's a few months younger than Johnson. After joining the team amid their worst stretch of the year where they were going 6 games without a win, Tucker is a jolt of lightning, no pun intended, to the roster, scoring 2 goals in a win over the Coyotes to get the team back on track and adding 4 more points over the next 3 games to ensure the Leafs stay there. Early March sees the Leafs stable and finally somewhat healthy, though the underperforming Kristich is out. Berezin, Perreault, Karpovtsev, and Markov are all at full power and back in the lineup. By March 10th, the team has clinched a spot in the playoffs and is on a clear pace to win the division, though the Devils took their spot atop the conference. They're fresh off 4 straight wins and are staring down a chance to knock their only real competition for the division, the Ottawa Senators, back a step in their next game. The Leafs own the early going thanks to Steve Tomas and the red-hot Yanic Perreault, and then, out of nowhere, Brian Berard is hit in the eye. It's a nothing play by Sens young star Marian Hossa, just a guy slapping at the puck, but the result is bad. Extremely bad. Blood rushes from Berard's face as he hurtles off the ice and into the Leafs locker room, heading from there to the hospital. Hours of surgery, but the damage is catastrophic. He will likely lose his eye. By some miracle, Berard retains the ability to sense light through his right eye, which gives the doctors some hope that maybe, someday, his damaged eye will be at least somewhat usable. But while his eye was saved, the recently 23-year-old's hockey career may be over. Hossa, with Wade Redden and Daniel Alfredsson, visited Berard in the hospital, devastated by the injury and profusely apologizing, which Berard accepted without hesitation. The kid who was once labeled as a party boy and immature sat in a hospital, looking at the possible end of his career, handling it with the utmost grace. I was always impressed by the way Bryan took this turn of fate, the way he dealt with the injury immediately in the hospital the next day, through all the surgeries, and until this day, I've never heard him once complain. I was really impressed with the way he handled himself. Leafs trainer Brent Smith will tell ESPN's Joe McDonald years later. While hockey now seems inconsequential, the Leafs are forced to move forward with a defense featuring a lot more Gerald Diduck than they would have hoped. Both teams involved in the Berard incident walk awkwardly to the season's end, the Leafs going 6-7 and the Sens 7-7. This does mean the Leafs still win their division, but they fall to the 3 seed. Truthfully, they should be the 4, as the Flyers surged past the Devils to win the Atlantic, sinking New Jersey to the 4 spot. The fall in the standings cost the Leafs a rematch with one of the sub-90 point playoff teams. The Sabres with Dominik Hasek held together by duct tape and glue, or the Penguins that did not move to Missouri with Yager and his squad of somehow even more Czechs. Instead, the Leafs once again stare into the face of the Ottawa Senators. The Senators are an odd team. They were led in points by, of all people, Radek Bonk, who was widely deemed a draft bust going into the season after being drafted 3rd overall back in 1994. The team's points per game mantle, however, was held by Captain Daniel Alfredsson, a playmaking winger with a sound defensive game. Young Marian Hossa could also be considered the team's best offensive option, possessing a similar skill level to Alfredsson, but at just 21, having the potential to become an even better goal scorer and defender. The squad has solid secondary punch, with young Vinny Prospel, veteran goal scorer Sean McEachern, and, oh hey, it's Joe Juneau again. Andreas Dackel was bumped from the power play by the arrival of the young guns, but he can still contribute, and even more defensively gifted wings in the form of Rob Zaminer and Magnus Arvidsson round out the top of the Sens lineup. This team had a lot of huge improvements up front from guys, namely Hossa, Prospel, and Alfredsson, compared to last season, which took their offense from 5th in the league to 6th. Wait, wasn't this team 2nd in the conference last year in '99? Those of you who are watching this on your TV and not playing it while you do dishes ask. Yes, because there is a huge MVP caliber crater in this forward group versus last season. See, this is Daniel Alfredsson's first year as the team's captain, and there are 2 things you need to know about the old captain. He's an incredible hockey player, and he really likes money. Alexei Yashin finished 2nd in Hart voting behind Jaromir Jagr in 1999. He led the Sens in every major offensive category. He was far and away the team's best player and had been for years. Even when the Sens were truly horrible early in their existence, Yashin was still scoring around a point per game. He was the Ottawa Senators for many years. Now, the second fact about Yashin. Wikipedia isn't a great source, but sometimes its subheads will tell you things. The subheads for Yashin's time in Ottawa? Contract disputes, playoff bound, contract disputes again. We're currently in the contract disputes again section. Yashin, wanting more money, walked out on the Sens for the 2nd time while under contract, attempting to force a pay raise. He first played this game back in 1995. The guy wants money regardless of the contract he signed. Man, they're guaranteed contracts. That's something that's always been important to the players' union. You can't then try to strong-arm your boss into making them not guaranteed. It would be different if he was an RFA. Peter Nedved did this to the Penguins, but he didn't have a contract. Kristich was doing this at the beginning of the season. That brought him to the Leafs. Sure, whatever. He didn't have a deal. I hate to say this. Basically, every time a player doesn't re-sign to get a better deal, William Nylander, for example, I'll typically side with the player. Hell, in the NFL, players hold out for more money with time left on their contracts all the time. But that's because their contracts aren't guaranteed and their union sucks, so they have to personally fight for every red cent possible. They're within their rights to do whatever they want. And you know, get the billion-dollar corporation's money. What do I care? Especially in the 90s, where there isn't even a salary cap. Generally speaking, I'm a very pro-labor guy. But man, Yashin's being a real tool about this. Yashin will continue to fight the Sens about this for months to come, but that's beyond our scope right now. I just wanted to let you know where he was. So let's move on to the defense. A top pair of Jason York and Igor Kravchuk is fine. Sami Salo is a solid defensive piece, and 22-year-old Chris Phillips plays like a 40-year-old, which is fine. Patrick Travers and Grant Ledyard on the bottom pair. This group is awful. Okay, awful is maybe strong, but no shot this is it, man. Like the forward group, there's a huge hole in the defense. In Game 82, the Senators' number 1 every situation defenseman Wade Redden broke a bone in his foot, which will likely keep him out of the series. Finally, the goaltender. Tom Barrasso? Am I being punked? The Senators were fleeced by the Penguins when they acquired the fading Barrasso, sending out their struggling star goalie from last season, Ron Tugnut, and sound third-pairing defenseman Joni Laukkanen. Barrasso was not good at all for the Penguins this year and has played even worse for the Sens. Ron Tugnut, inversely, has been terrific in Pittsburgh, while the loss of Laukkanen seemed a lot more inconsequential for the Sens before the Redden injury. This team isn't good. I mean, they have good team defense thanks to coach Jacques Martin, so they'll be annoying, but come on. This is an extremely blah group. In Game 1, the Leafs fall a bit into the Senators' suffocating play style, but Darcy Tucker scores to put the Leafs up on a feed from Perreault. Man, Perreault is playing the best hockey of his life right now. Cujo slams the door on the Sens, who have some chances. While the Leafs hold on to a 2-0 victory, they suffer a critical injury. Yanic Perreault blew out his knee getting hit by Jason York. He's done for the year. Second line Kevin Adams once again. The injury draws Macaulay back into the lineup, but the last remaining member of the Gilmore trade has not at all had the injury comeback the Leafs would have hoped this year. After the first period of Game 2 looks more like the Game 1 slog, Tucker opens the scoring again. Rapid-fire follow-ups from Sundin and Tomas, and then Tomas again later in the period, put the game out of reach for the Sens in short order. The Sundin line is slaughtering the Sens' matchup second line of Hossa, Arvidsson, and Bonk. Cujo has been unbeatable outside of one goal from Sami Salo. Be gone, Sens. It was fun while it lasted. In Game 3, Ottawa's captain gives them the lead early. The first period gets even worse as Nick Antropov heads down the runway to the dressing room after a big hit from Chris Phillips. Rob Zaminer banks one off Kaberle to lengthen the Sens' lead in the second. Luckily, the Leafs have Steve Thomas to push back, but Cujo gives up a pretty gnarly goal to offensive non-factor Colin Forbes, allowing a 3-mile-per-hour backhand to float over him. The Leafs once again draw within one on a goal from Dmitry Kristich, though the comeback falls flat as Zaminer scores on an outside slap shot. During the goal, Alfredsson guided Corey Cross into Joseph, or maybe vice versa, but regardless, Cujo was contacted, and the Leafs goalie goes ballistic, dropping his gloves and thankfully falling down before he can beat official Mike McGuff senseless. Bad game, very bad game, after 2 dominant wins. Antropov tore his MCL. Another center down. The Leafs are starting to get a little pissy about all of these injuries against the Sens, and while none of them came via dirty plays, the Leafs don't like it, and understandably so. The Leafs are now down to Chris King up front, and that's with Wendell's husk still in the press box. Andreas Dackel is the man of Game 4. First he butt-ends Tucker in the face, then emerges from the penalty box to put the Sens up 1-0 in the second. Dackel strikes again in the third to give the Sens a permanent advantage despite a late goal from Berrazin. Suddenly, we have a series, and much of that has to do with the play of Tom Barrasso. From the Star, in a post-game interview with CBC's Hockey Night in Canada, Barrasso took umbrage at a question from interviewer Scott Oake, who wondered if Barrasso had heard any of the criticism through Games 1 and 2, directed at him by the media. I was the star of the game in Game 1, and we scored 1 goal in Game 2. I really couldn't give a shit what you people have to say, began Barrasso. Man, you're telling me people think this guy's a dick? That's crazy. Barrasso has earned some surliness after 2 outstanding games, finally putting an extremely difficult season, one where he lost his father, back on track. The Leafs have tried to hide the Didic-Cross defense pair as much as possible, but they have not been good. Cross can be a compliment to a good defenseman like Berard, but he can't lug around Gerald Didic. It's not a good scene with those two on the ice. For Game 5, the Leafs put Wendell in. That's a vibes victory. Well, I won't turn the sirens on unless the Leafs fall behind. This is bad. This is really bad. I don't think this is good. Now into the third, this is bad. Late in the third, this is not good. They look to the hottest Leaf to turn the tide.
3-on-3 here. Thomas's drive scores! Steve Thomas!
Want to see him do it again? Into overtime, and the Leafs' power line of Berrazin, Sundin, and Tomas grabs a chokehold on the series. Boy, if I had to chow down on Crow after the Tomas signing, what an ad for the Leafs. What a player. After the game, Darcy Tucker profusely praises Sundin and his leadership, a stark contrast to the typical timbre of the media toward the captain. Juneau opens the scoring again in Game 6, which is not ideal. Neither is Kravchuk scoring early in the second to make it 2-0. But just 12 seconds later, it's Stumpy, again, sparking the Leafs with his 6th goal in as many games. Sundin and company continue to eat Bonk and Buddy's lunch as the towering Swede ties the game. Berrazin with another quick goal, then Wendell completing a 4-goal period puts the Leafs up 2 heading into the third. With the struggles of Game 3 long behind him, Joseph ends the Senators' season having stopped 36 of 38 shots in the elimination game. While it was hairy for a second, and the Leafs are certainly more tattered now than they were heading into the series, the better team prevailed. In 2000, the underdog teams weren't quite as effective as they were in 99, with only the Penguins sneaking past their favored opposition. In a 5-game win over the Caps, Jani Laukkanen had 2 goals and 3 assists, while Ron Tugnut went .950. I figured that was relevant information. While Pittsburgh will head toward a cross-state matchup with a Philadelphia team once again without Eric Lindros, the Leafs have a new foe to face. While the Leafs could brute force their way past the Senators' matchup line through their pedestrian defense and put the puck behind their aging goaltender, that will not be the case against the New Jersey Devils. They are the most suffocating team in the NHL. The Devils bulldozed the Pavel Bure Panthers in what will be that iteration of Florida's team's only trip to the playoffs, allowing just 6 goals in a 4-game sweep. The team's defensive game is their hallmark, yes, but they have some firepower too, finishing 2nd in the NHL in goals in the regular season. A huge breakout from two-way sniper Patrick Elias saw him leap from 17 goals to 35 and 50 points to 72. If there were analytics in this era, he'd be a darling. But it's far from just him. The Devils are extremely deep. Each and every one of their lines have legitimate threats on them. Most of them have multiple, like Jason Arnott. Eliash's massive center offsets his Czech winger's finesse by hossing his way to goals. Hell, even Randy McKay, the line's complementary player, has some scoring touch to go with his vicious forechecking. 2 more Czechs drive the second line. Extremely dense matchup center Bobby Holik and rifleman Peter Sikora carrying around guy Steve Kelly. Third line center, rookie and soon-to-be Calder winner Scott Gomez came essentially out of nowhere, putting up 70 points. He's not much of a goal scorer, but he's a marvelous passer, a skill he uses to feed the recently reacquired and cantankerous as ever 1995 Conn Smythe winner Claude Lemieux and his fellow veteran Sergei Nemchinov. And finally, a 4th line of 2 more terrific defensive forwards in John Madden and Jay Pandolfo, with a gentleman you may have heard of, Alexander McGillney. Good grief, dude. Oh, the defense? Scott Niedermayer is a dominant 2-way number 1. Captain Scott Stevens is a brick wall who kills people just for the joy of it. Vladimir Malikov played top pair minutes in Montreal before the Devils got him at the deadline and is fresh off 3 straight double-digit goal seasons. Brian Rafalski, another guy that came out of nowhere to get Calder consideration and will get Norris votes as soon as next year. And while Ken Danico and Colin White aren't exactly sexy players back there, they grind opposing forwards into paste. Oh, and Martin Brodeur is in goal. A guy who, in a world without Dominik Hasek, would be a 2-time Hart finalist and a 2-time Vezina winner at just 28. I'm not optimistic here. While the Devils had more points than the Leafs in the regular season, the 3-seeded Leafs would still play host to the 4-seeded Devils in Game 1. It's all Cujo. While Sikora answers quickly after a Yuskevich goal in the second period gives the Leafs the lead, a Darcy Tucker goal in the third serves as the difference maker. This is one of the hardest series to find video for I've ever encountered, but luckily, the Tucker goal is portrayed by this little drawing in the Toronto Star. Nice feed, I assume, Wendell? For Game 2, the Devils say, oh, well, Joseph won't let us score more than 1 goal? That's fine. What if we just grind you down instead? After the Leafs commit the cardinal sin of falling behind the Devils early in the first, thanks to what will be rookie Colin White's only playoff goal for the next decade, New Jersey gives no room to breathe. The Leafs get caught up in the, quote, chess-like devil's pace, as Rosie DiMano of The Star puts it. If the Leafs are going to win, they have to simply stop being clutched and grabbed and drugged to the ground. Easier said than done. Bad loss, but one that you kind of expect at least once when playing the Devils. The Leafs just need to punch back. Hey, there's Brian Berard. As infuriating as Game 2's glacial pace was for the Leafs, they pray for its return in Game 3. With a merely mortal Joseph behind them instead of the superhuman from Games 1 and 2, the Leafs get blown out of the building in Game 3. Though the game does mark the Leafs' highest shot total, unfortunately that total is 23. With so little room for offense, if the Leafs want to win this series, Joseph will have to do it for them. In Game 4, Cujo obliges. Though he gives up the first goal early, Joseph is titanic behind the Leafs as they rally with goals from Höglund and instant fan favorite Tucker to give Toronto the lead by the end of the first. As the oft underestimated offense of the Devils bombards the Leafs' net throughout the second, Toronto's goalie stands strong. The game ticks down to its final minutes, and Claude Lemieux puts an innocuous shot on Cujo. The Leafs' star netminder loses track of the puck and kicks it into his own net. Tie game. That's a death knell if ever I've seen one. The youngest Leaf in the lineup, Thomas Kaberle, says no. The Leafs hold on. Tie series heading back to Canada. There is a will this team has to not die that they were so clearly lacking in the latter Burns years. This is a team that will fight for every inch if they must. Even staring down a giant, the Leafs will try. Gary Volk, who opens the scoring in Game 5, personifies this. Before coming to Toronto, the depth winger's career was dead, playing 7 minutes per night in Pittsburgh. But here he is, like he was last spring, firing up the team with huge goals. The Leafs' big guys are being shut down. The depth has come to answer. While Elias ties the game before the end of the first frame, Jeff Farkas, who just joined the Leafs in the playoffs after a stellar career at Boston College, gives them back the lead. While Nemchinov of the Devils reknots the score, the Leafs are hanging in there despite constant bludgeoning by Stevens. But two huge slap shots change everything. Vladimir Malakhov first, who had mostly been forced to surrender his offensive upside to police Berezin, blistering a sorcerous pass from Gomez past Cujo. Then Madden, with an outside rifle that freezes Joseph in his place. Berezin scores to make it 4-3, but it's all too late. The momentum the Leafs had quashed with a wave of Scott Gomez's stick. Game 6 on the road, facing elimination, the Leafs that fought so hard to be here are crumpled in just 18 seconds by Peter Sikora. The Devils drown the Leafs unlike anything you've ever seen, likely anything you will ever see. The Leafs' shot total in the deciding game, 6. 6 shots. The lowest total ever in a playoff game since shots were consistently tracked. The Devils win 3-0. This one game takes the Leafs from being comfortable in their own skin, coming into their own as a fast, firepower-first team, to one that no longer looked equipped to play in the dead puck era. They need some sort of answer physically after being manhandled by the Devils. Optimally, they need more physical guys that are good enough to be on the ice for more than 5 minutes per night. While it pains me to say that any team should forsake their offensive style for grit, it's 2000. Hockey isn't a game of finesse and skill. It's a game of clutching, grabbing, and brute force. This game marks the moment the Leafs stop adding players like Dmitry Kristich and start adding more players like Darcy Tucker. In the summer of 2000, the Leafs get ready to fight.
They